We've not talked about kink a lot on Open Late, but I would love for you to sort of give an overview of, specifically what you speak to. And I know you talk about a lot of different kink, but you call yourself a service daddy. So what is a service daddy, and where is the sort of idea or inspiration for this born, at least in your experience?
Yeah, I feel like part of the journey is finding out your identity, and you do that by finding the things that you're into, and often that's connected to your identity. So a lot of people enjoy kinks or have a kink or a fetish, and it's kind of next to their identity, and they might not have a kind of identity that's nested in kink. They might just enjoy some wax play now and then, because of the sensation. And that's totally fine and valid. That's great. And there's other people that enjoy that, and that's because they are a masochist and they enjoy lots of sensations like that. And that kind of rabbit hole might lead them to finding out that they are possibly a submissive who is a masochist. And then they go, oh, okay, well, that means that I'm on a side of this spectrum that might be really satisfied being with or having experiences with someone from the other side because they work well together, which is finding a dominant. So it is kind of the rabbit hole thing, and a lot of people kind of take a few steps and do tumble down. Some people they don't, and that might be because they just want to try some wax play, or they just like rope play because it's very calming, and the rest of the things don't interest them, and that's totally fine too. But if you do like some of the things, you might want to step a bit further in and experiment. And I think for me, I always knew that the rabbit hole was there. It was just a little bit in denial or unsure. And I think part of that is a male thing, embracing that I was not just a dominant, but also had a strong sadistic streak was very difficult for me because I knew that was perilous. I didn't want to be a negative or toxic, male, and it's hard to embrace that you can be a caring force and sadistic at the same time, and that is part of my identity as a daddy. Is I am a sadist, but I'm also a caregiver, and part of the service that I like doing as a kind of service daddy is not just education, but also my sadistic side. So if you're a masochist, me engaging with you as a sadist can be a service. That's part of what satisfies me.
Yeah.
So figuring all that out, took a couple of years, and I mean, it took my entire life, but I think I had a few decades of not confronting it, and then I did, and then I embraced it consciously and started using the words and started learning and studying and started having experiences. And after a few years of that, I started thinking, oh my God, something like what I'm doing now would have really helped me. And so that's what I'm doing now as part of the service is I want to do what helps people that would have helped me, which is also part of my daddy side. That's where that comes from, is I want to be the role that I think I could have used. I'm kind of fulfilling that identity that I didn't really have. So that's where it all comes from, and that's what I'm doing now through whether it's silly, funny memes or guides on how to set up a scene or vet a partner, or these Q&As. It's all kind of linked to the same thing, which is why I'm really enjoying it, and I really like putting time and energy into it because it's linked to my identity.
Yeah. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, did you engage in this type of play or these types of scenes like at all in your early life before you fully accepted this side of yourself, with partners sort of not really setting up things, but just sort of bumbling along and figuring it out? Or was it very much like a closeted thing? Like you knew you had these desires, but you weren't acting on any of it until decades later?
No, I definitely was doing some of it in almost all relationships, I think. And I think that's what people do, and they just don't realize it. You just do it not consciously, which is very human, but it's not good. It's not ideal because things can go wrong. thankfully, I don't think anything never did anything too extreme. But when you look at past relationships, it's like when you realize your identity and you look back at like the music or the movies that you like and you go, oh my God, that's why I was obsessed with Secretary for 6 months. Like
Yeah, it makes so much sense.
it all lines up and you start thinking, oh, I thought everyone liked that. You're like, no, 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 that's you and, and all your peers and you start figuring it out. And I think I had a lot of relationships that were dynamic. They were actually DS, dominant, submissive, dynamic relationships. They just weren't realized. They weren't aware on either side. And I think that's a lot of people. People listening right now, what's your relationship dynamic? Because every relationship has a dynamic of some kind. And there might be many that are kind of leaning towards a DS, but if you're not confronting that and negotiating it and doing it with awareness, then it can go toxic. It can be unhealthy.
Mhm.
Or at very least, will limit your enjoyment because you're not doing it, with good awareness and good know-how. So I think
Right.
that's what I was doing. I was having relationships and not really understanding why I wanted to do certain things or why then things were uncomfortable. So that was a long time. And then I started just accepting it and go, okay, I think I'm this. And even the daddy part, it took a while for me to really accept, oh, I am, that's what it is. It's not just like a bit of a thing or a role. It's like, that's actually me. Um,
Right.
and now that I just haven't looked back. I haven't had anything remotely representing vanilla sex in years.
Not even once.
Not once. And that's the thing. I may not have ever had it because I think I always had these behaviors. So for me, it was always kind of an intense physical kind of. There was always a kind of dominant sphere to where I would go. But
Mm.
now it's just very, very aware and conscious and more. But yeah, I haven't had anything like that in years, and I don't see myself wanting to or being satisfied with it at all. It's
Right.
just not my flavor.
Well, especially once now you sort of have the language and the context and the experience for what brings you the most pleasure, why would you choose something else? Um, I want to kind of pick at this a little bit because you said it's a sphere of dominance, right? And I think that maybe there's people listening who don't even know what that can look like. But before we do, I just want to recap for someone who maybe if you're listening and you don't know anything about kink or BDSM culture, just to sort of identify what some of these terms mean. So we've been saying DS dynamic a bunch. If you can go into just the general definitions of everything that we're sort of touching on for somebody who maybe this is their first time.
Sure. I mean, DS is just dominant submissive, which is just
Mm-hmm.
the two sides of kind of central identity of BDSM, which is um, the part of the or half of the DS in BDSM.
Mm-hmm.
Is dominant and submissive. And it's just the two different kinds of identity that people usually find themselves in. It's all a spectrum. So you can even be both. You can be a switch. So, I mean, just to make things more confusing, you can have days where you feel your dominant identity, and then you can have other days where you feel your submissive identity. And they're like magical creatures, switches. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Or you can just be on one side, and that's part of your identity, not just sexually. It's not just a sex thing. It really is an identity thing. It's how you relate to others and how you can relate to someone on the other side. And it doesn't mean passive. People think submissive, like, oh, that means I'm like a quiet, passive person. No, no, no. You could be a, vivacious, CEO, identity in that part of your life, but you might have a submissive identity where to balance out that part of your identity, you need to find that balance through submitting, which requires someone on the other side to let you do that. And that's really how it works is you engage with someone on the other side, and that lets you or helps you fully kind of stretch out in that part of your identity. So you can be more of a submissive and really act that out when you've got a dynamic with a dominant.
Beautiful. That's like really where I wanted you to go, and I appreciate that a lot. And just also to remind people, like it has nothing to do with gender or the way you identify, because you can find, people who are dominant all across the spectrum, as well as submissive. So,
Oh, absolutely. One of my
yeah.
best clients right now is another daddy who is a queer woman in the States, and she's a daddy DADDI. She's that
Oh,
kind of daddy.
cool.
And
I
so we
love
have
it.
full daddy chats, and we talk about like being into the same things with our subs. And so our gender, geography, and orientation has nothing to do with it, because
Hmm.
kink identity is its own thing. There is the stereotype of the male, that kind of figure, and that is a generalization for a reason. But it is not what it means. You can be absolutely anything and be a dom, and you can be absolutely anything and be a sub. One of my friends, male submissive, is this like ripped, shredded military dude who is a sub to his female dominant partner, and that's such a great example of like what people assume and expect, and then it's like no, this is also true, this is also there. And
Hmm.
that's important that people realize that, yeah, our DS identity, our kink identity, has nothing to do with those other things. It's separate.
Yeah, it's what really allows us to express ourselves in the full spectrum of like, humanity. Because that's sort of how you mentioned like the CEO, very in control woman, earlier, and that's where I am. And then as soon as I'm like with my husband, I prefer to be in a much more submissive role because I'm exhausted. Like I don't want to make any more decisions, and I don't want to have to be responsible for anything else.
Exactly. If you have like a big stressful day or week, and then you get to dinner and your partner says, well, where do you want to go? And you're like, oh, just please. Like this
Just tell
one,
me where.
it's such a common thing. And I feel like that is a bit of like a flag, in a positive way, of you might have a submissive side, because when you find someone that goes, okay, we're having dinner here, and I've already booked it, and this is happening, and we're going to go there, and then we're going to watch this movie, and then you're going to have an early night. And if that just makes you go, oh, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happens on the regular, if that's what you really need, then that is a dynamic in play where you've got a partner who is taking that responsibility on for you to let you relax, to let you tune out and just be taken care of. And that's a big part of DS is care. It's not leather and chains and basements and red rooms and all that bullshit. It is looking after the person. And sometimes looking after that person does mean putting them over your knee and spanking them until they're red. But it also means tucking them in and making dinner or having dinner delivered to them, or just asking them like, how are you? Are you well today? Why aren't, what can we do to make sure that you're feeling better? Did you sleep? Those kind of things are a real service orientated caregiving, and that's a big part of being a dominant.
Thank you so much for sharing that and kind of giving that overall picture because, yeah, it is so much. And I want to learn more. And I am curious about, we'll back it up to my question of what is the sort of, I forget how you put it, but like the scale of dominance, and how does that sort of play out in your dynamics and your relationships, and how does that also serve you? Like, how do you get fueled or fed by maybe impact play or whatever it is? If you could sort of paint this picture for us.
Mm. Yeah, there is a common question I get. I do Q&As regularly, and I do get questions very regularly from submissives that are almost worried that the other side, their partner or the partner that they want to find, isn't getting anything out of it. They're almost thinking, this is so good for me, and it's definitely my happy place, but how is it yours? How is it a dominance? Like how I feel uncomfortable that I'm getting all this, and it's very sweet. It's a huge misunderstanding that like that's how the poles work. Like if you're getting something out of it to that degree, and you find, okay, this is what I need, the other side is getting what they need out of it, and that's what they need by giving that to you. So by letting a submissive submit, by letting a submissive tune out and relax and have that balance, that is part of what gives me balance as a dominant. That's what I need. I need to care for, I need to look after and to discipline and to instruct. All these things are things that I need to do. So that's why it can be such a healthy, dynamic relationship, a dominant and a submissive, because they're both absolutely getting what they need out of it. And then on top of that, yeah, there's the sphere, there's the spectrum of different kinds. So you have all these different identities within dominant and submissive. You know, you might be a pet kind of identity where you really identify as a kitten or a bunny or a pup, and the dominant might identify as your owner and your trainer. There can be full slave master identities, which are really driven by service and worship, and very high protocols of behavior, where you have to get permission to eat and to go to the bathroom and to even use furniture. You know, that's part of the sphere as well. Then there's the kind of more daddy, little girl or baby girl identities, where it's all about care and being looked after by that kind of almost kind of parental kind of role, where it's really your job to just follow and to learn and to be guided and looked after. Um, yeah, that's what makes it so fascinating. There's all these things, and you don't have to be just one. You might be a little bit of each, or you might find that you start exploring as one and you have one experience and go, "Oh my God, I'm actually this." That's
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so fun to play and to figure all this out, because you're discovering yourself, and that lets you have these great experiences and find more of you and have fun with others that are finding more of themselves.
And I really love that you keep bringing it back to fun and play, because I
Mm.
think so many people are afraid to even try these dynamics because they associate BDSM with, as you said, whips and chains and handcuffs and red rooms and dungeons. But there's so much levity that comes with sort of these playful dynamics that don't have to be so serious. I mean, and that, you're the funny dom bringing that to the table, because like if you can't laugh at yourself, at different moments when you're having sex or playing out a scene, right? Then what are you really doing? Of course, like you want it to be serious some of the time.
Mm.
But I think it's really beautiful how you talk about this balance of care and being looked after with instruction or, punishment or being reprimanded, because it's all a part of it. You can't just be all the way over here in left field all the time. You want to have balance to create a healthy relationship dynamic
Hmm.
in any way.